It began with something simple. A single transmission, then silence. The colony on Arcturus 7 had been thriving, nestled in the quiet, uncharted outer rim of human-controlled space. But now, its once bustling cities and vibrant trade routes had fallen into an eerie stillness. No distress signals, no warning, just an unbroken, unsettling quiet. When the first report arrived, it was brushed off as a technical glitch, a simple communication failure, or perhaps a systems malfunction. After all, space was vast, and these colonies were far from the safety net of human central command. However, a second report from a neighboring system confirmed it. The same silence. No contact from the alien civilization that had shared the space for centuries. No signs of life. No response to human overtures. It wasn't just Arcturus 7. It was the entire region. A senior envoy was dispatched to investigate the mystery. Commander Thalia Quinlan, an experienced diplomat, known for her steady hand and ability to smooth over intergalactic tensions, was assigned to the mission. She and her team arrived on the scene, expecting a technical issue to resolve within a few days. Instead, they encountered something far more unsettling. The once bustling trade stations lay abandoned, their neon lights flickering intermittently in the dark. The alien race that had lived here, a quiet but technologically advanced species known as the Aurelians, were nowhere to be found. A strange discovery was made when Commander Quinlan's team entered one of the main hubs, a library of sorts, where the Aurelians had once shared their history with the humans. Its archives, once filled with a wealth of knowledge, were now eerily blank. The data had been wiped clean. As Quinlan sifted through the dusty remnants, she found a series of symbols carved into the walls, an old alien script she'd seen only once before, years ago. The symbols had been tied to a legend, a myth passed down among the human explorers of the galaxy. The First Reckoning. The legend spoke of a time when the galaxy's oldest beings would retreat from the stars, a time when their dominance would end, and a new race would rise to take their place. Quinlan's heart sank as she read through the familiar markings. This wasn't just a mysterious disappearance. The Aurelians were fleeing. But why? And more importantly, why now? "Commander, we got a situation," came the voice of Lieutenant Sarah Jin over the comms. Quinlan snapped to attention as she turned to face her team. "We're not alone," Sarah continued. "We've picked up something. Large, moving, and fast. It's not one of ours." The hairs on the back of Quinlan's neck stood up. She felt it in the air. Something was coming. And it was nothing human. "We need to get back to the ship now," Quinlan ordered, her voice urgent. As they raced back to their transport, the reality of the situation began to sink in. The Aurelians weren't just avoiding human space. They were running from something far worse than anything humanity had ever encountered, something that had existed long before them. A cold fear crept through Quinlan's thoughts as she realized what it all meant. The ancient beings, those who had ruled the galaxy for millennia, were no longer the undisputed masters of the stars. Something had changed. Something had awoken. And humanity, whether they were ready for it or not, was about to be at the center of it. The human fleet, now on high alert, made its way toward the Aurelians' abandoned homeworld. Commander Quinlan and her team had barely left the station when a new set of troubling reports flooded in. Alien species across the galaxy were pulling back from human-controlled space, some even fleeing entire star systems, and in each case, the silence was deafening. This was no isolated incident. The Aurelians' retreat was the tip of a larger, more sinister trend. But why now? The galaxy had known uneasy peace for centuries, with many ancient civilizations existing in their own distant corners of space. Humanity, although expanding rapidly, had never threatened that balance. At least, not until now. Upon arrival at the Aurelians' homeworld, Quinlan was met by a small but highly specialized team of archaeologists, linguists, and historians. Their mission was to uncover any fragments of the Aurelians' culture that might reveal the source of their fear and, more importantly, why it seemed to be connected to humanity's rapid expansion. The team found themselves at the edge of a vast, crumbled city, its architecture elegant yet decayed, remnants of an advanced civilization long gone. The air was thick with dust, and the sounds of their boots on the broken streets were the only noise in the otherwise silent world. It felt as if time had simply stopped. "Look at this," Dr. Elena Vole, the head archaeologist, called out, her voice reverberating off the empty stone. She was standing before a towering monument, an obelisk covered in ancient symbols. Her fingers traced the strange characters, and for a moment, it seemed as if the air itself shimmered. A crackling noise filled the silence. "I've seen these markings before," Quinlan said, stepping forward. "They're not just any language. This is part of the Aurelians' ancient script, but it's different from anything we've found before. It's old, almost pre-civilization." Dr. Vos nodded gravely. "It's the same symbols from the legend, the ones that spoke of the first reckoning." Quinlan's eyes narrowed as the weight of the words sank in. The legend, which had been passed down by human explorers and shared in hushed whispers among scholars, was suddenly more than just a myth. The first reckoning wasn't a story, it was a prophecy, a warning, one that seemed to be linked directly to humanity's rise. As Quinlan and her team dug deeper into the ruins, they uncovered more records hidden beneath layers of stone and debris. Digital files, encrypted and ancient, still somehow intact. They were able to piece together a fragmented transmission from an Aurelian leader who, in a desperate tone, spoke of the coming new order, a force that would bring about the fall of the old ways. The message was clear. The rise of the new race cannot be stopped. The reckoning is here. The words sent a chill down Quinlan's spine. This wasn't just a warning. It was a statement of fact. The ancient beings weren't simply avoiding humans. They were running from them. From humanity. "This changes everything," Quinlan muttered, her gaze fixed on the digital readout before her. "The first reckoning. It's about us. We were the enemy they feared." The room fell silent. The implications were staggering. If these ancient beings were running from humanity, then it meant that the galaxy's oldest civilizations, those that had once ruled without question, had recognized humanity as a threat. But a threat of what kind? Quinlan's thoughts were interrupted by a low, rumbling sound. The ground beneath them began to shake. The archaeologists exchanged nervous glances as Quinlan looked up to the sky, her heart pounding in her chest. Something was coming. Before she could react, a blinding flash of light burst through the atmosphere. A massive ship, not of human design, tore through the sky. It was unmistakable. An ancient, colossal vessel, the likes of which humanity had never seen. The air crackled with energy as the ship's engines powered down, landing softly amidst the ruins. And with it, an eerie sense of finality. The galaxy's old order was crumbling. Humanity had been the catalyst, and the ancient beings, whether they were ready or not, were now about to face the consequences of their own prophecy. The ancient ship, massive and silent, loomed above the ruins. Its sleek, obsidian surface shimmered under the light of a distant star, sending unsettling ripples of energy through the atmosphere. The team, frozen in awe and fear, could feel the weight of its presence. Commander Quinlan's heart raced as she stared at the vessel, her mind struggling to process the situation. "We need to get back to the transport," Quinlan ordered, her voice firm despite the growing tension. She knew they had to act quickly. The Aurelians weren't the only ones who were scared. Humanity had made enemies, old enemies, ones who had been watching for centuries, waiting for the right moment to make their move. As Quinlan and her team made their way to their shuttle, a strange, almost tangible feeling of being watched hung over them. The air felt thick with something ancient, something that had been dormant for too long. They reached their transport, but before they could take off, the ground beneath them rumbled again. A deep, resonating voice echoed through the comm system, distorted by static, but unmistakably commanding. "You have awakened the reckoning." The voice sent a chill through Quinlan's bones. It was neither human nor Arielian. It was something older, far older. The message wasn't a warning. It was a declaration. The reckoning had arrived. "Get us in the air." Quinlan barked to her pilot, Lieutenant Jin, who quickly powered up the engines and pushed the shuttle into the air. But as the shuttle ascended, the massive ship above them began to move. Slowly at first, then with terrifying speed, it shot down toward the ground, releasing bursts of energy that crackled through the atmosphere. "Commander, incoming." Jin's voice trembled. "We've got weapons fire on our tail." Before Quinlan could respond, a massive energy beam shot out from the ancient ship, narrowly missing their shuttle. The shockwave from the blast sent them spiraling into a tumble, narrowly avoiding a direct hit. The ancient ship's power was overwhelming, but humanity's ingenuity was about to show its strength. "All hands, brace for impact," Quinlan shouted, gripping her seat as the shuttle fought to regain stability. Jin's fingers danced across the control panel, the shuttle's thrusters firing at full capacity as she tried to evade another barrage of fire. "We can't outrun this thing. It's too fast. We need to return fire." "Return fire." Quinlan's voice was cold. "We don't have the firepower to stand against that ship. Our best chance is to get out of range and signal for reinforcements." Just as Quinlan thought they might escape, another voice interrupted over the comms. "You cannot run. You cannot hide. This is the reckoning of your kind." The transmission cut out abruptly, replaced by static. The voice was gone, but its words echoed in Quinlan's mind, building a sense of dread she couldn't shake. The shuttle veered through the atmosphere, narrowly avoiding more blasts, the planet's surface growing further away with each passing second. But the ancient ship was relentless. It followed them, its engines glowing bright as it pursued them through the sky with impossible speed. Quinlan felt the tension in the air, the weight of inevitability pressing down on her chest. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was a battle for survival, for humanity's place in a galaxy that had once seemed endless. With the shuttle's shields weakening, Quinlan knew they couldn't outrun the ship forever. "Jin, can you stabilize the ship long enough for us to get a message out?" she asked urgently. "I'll try," Jin replied, sweat beading on her forehead. She was pushing the shuttle systems to their limits. They had to make it out of this alive, or humanity's entire future in the galaxy would be at risk. Then, as if fate had decided to play its hand, a sudden pulse of energy shot from the shuttle's engines. An emergency override, a failsafe. With a shudder, the shuttle veered off course, shooting towards an uncharted part of the planet's atmosphere. The ancient ship faltered for a moment, losing its pursuit, and Quinlan felt a flicker of hope. They had bought themselves a few precious minutes. But as the shuttle descended, they could already feel the eyes of the galaxy's oldest beings bearing down on them. The reckoning had begun, and humanity was at the center of it all. The shuttle limped through the atmosphere, its systems barely functional as the planet's atmosphere crackled with energy. The ancient ship's pursuit had ceased, temporarily, but the threat it represented lingered in the air like a storm cloud. Quinlan's mind raced as the shuttle descended to the surface of the planet, seeking shelter in the ruins of an old Irilian research station. The interior of the shuttle was tense and quiet, the crew visibly shaken from the harrowing escape. Quinlan's thoughts were as turbulent as the storm outside. The encounter had been more than just a warning. It was a harbinger of something much larger. The reckoning wasn't just about human dominance. It was about an ancient force fighting to maintain its hold on the galaxy. "We need to establish contact with command," Quinlan said, trying to steady her breath. Her voice carried the weight of urgency. "We need reinforcements. Fast." "Understood," Lieutenant Jin replied, her hands flying over the console. "I'm patching through now." But there was no response. The communication system had been disrupted by the violent energy pulses from the ancient ship. Quinlan's stomach churned. Without proper support, humanity stood at the precipice of a war it wasn't ready for. The old order, Those ancient beings who had once ruled the galaxy with iron fists was crumbling, and humanity, whether they knew it or not, was at the heart of its collapse. While the team worked to stabilize the shuttle, Quinlan paced. Her mind wandered back to the legend of the First Reckoning, the ancient prophecy that spoke of a time when humanity's rise would disrupt the galaxy's balance. But what Quinlan and her team had discovered went far beyond myth. The Old Order's retreat wasn't just out of fear, it was a desperation to survive. The Reckoning wasn't merely a threat to the ancient civilizations, it was a revolution against everything they had built. "Commander," Dr. Vose spoke up, her voice quiet but filled with a tremor of fear. "The data we found back at the ruins, it's even worse than we thought." This wasn't just a prophecy. The Aurelians had already faced something like this centuries ago, a war with another race, a race of humans. Quinlan froze. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. "Humans? What do you mean, another race of humans?" Vos nodded grimly. "Not the humans of today, but an early version, one that was lost in time. This ancient war wiped them out, but the Aurelians documented it. Their fears, their battle against humanity's past. It mirrors everything we're seeing now." "Are you saying," Quinlan's voice was barely above a whisper, "that we, humans, are the ones they're running from? The very thing they fought all those centuries ago?" Vos swallowed hard. "Yes, the old records speak of humanity, of a race that once sought to conquer, to take control of everything. The Aurelians fought and won, but it seems that history is repeating itself." Quinlan's mind raced as the implications set in. The humans they were now dealing with, the ones who had pushed past the Aurelians, and every other race, were not just expanding. They were doing so with a force that could tear apart the fragile peace of the galaxy. Humanity had become a reckoning, not only for the ancient beings but for the Old Order itself. The old civilizations, the ones that had dominated the galaxy for millennia, had built empires and lived in a fragile balance of power. But now that balance was faltering. One by one, the ancient species were withdrawing, retreating to the farthest reaches of the galaxy, unwilling to face humanity's challenge. Even the great cities of the Xorithians, a race that had once been known for their scientific and technological advancements, were becoming empty, ghostly shells. The word was spreading among the stars. Humanity had arrived, and nothing would be the same. "They're running," Quinlan said, her voice laced with disbelief. "They're all running from us." Vos nodded. "And when they're gone, there will be no one left to stop us." The silence in the shuttle was oppressive. Quinlan looked out of the viewport at the crumbling ruins below, her mind heavy with the realization that humanity had already begun to reshape the galaxy, not through peaceful diplomacy or economic alliances, but through raw, unstoppable force. With the old guard retreating into the shadows, and humanity no longer an insignificant newcomer, Quinlan knew the galaxy would soon be unrecognizable. The question was, what would humanity's new role be? Would they continue down a path of expansion, or would they become the very thing the old races feared? And if they did, could they ever turn back? The silence of the abandoned research station was broken only by the hum of the shuttle's failing systems. Quinlan, sitting in the cockpit, stared out at the crumbling ruins that once held the secrets of a race older than anything humanity could imagine. It was here, on this forgotten world, that humanity had crossed a line no one had even known existed. The ancient civilizations of the galaxy were waking up to the threat they had long feared. Humanity. "Commander, I've patched through a signal from the fleet." Lieutenant Jin's voice broke through Quinlan's reverie. "They're receiving our distress call. Backup is on the way." Relief washed over Quinlan, but only for a moment. The more immediate problem was the question of what to do next. The galaxy had been home to powerful beings that had governed the stars for centuries. Now, they were retreating. The ancient ship, the force that had pursued them moments ago, was not a singular entity. It was part of a larger movement, a last-ditch effort to preserve the order that had dominated the stars for millennia. They're not just retreating. They're regrouping, Quinlan muttered under her breath. And they won't stop until they've crushed whatever it is they fear, us. But even as she voiced her fears, Quinlan couldn't shake the feeling that they were not the only ones making moves. The reckoning, the uprising of humanity against the galaxy's old power structures, was more than a mere military conflict. It was part of something much larger, something that had been set into motion long before humanity's ships had even started reaching the stars. Quinlan's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden burst of static over the communications channel. A new transmission. Commander Quinlan, this is High Command. We are tracking an unprecedented fleet movement in your vicinity. Unknown vessels, massive, are en route to your location. Stand by for orders. The voice crackled, and the transmission ended abruptly. Quinlan's heart skipped a beat. Unknown vessels. Were these ships part of the ancient resistance that was now gathering to confront humanity's rise? We can't just sit here, Quinlan said, her hands gripping the controls as she looked at her team. If we wait for command, it'll be too late. We need to move. Dr. Vos stepped forward, her eyes wide with concern. What if they're already here? What if the reckoning is? Quinlan held up a hand to silence her. We don't have time to speculate. We move now, or we'll be caught in the middle of this war before we even understand who we're fighting. Jin nodded in agreement. I'll bring the shuttle online. We can make it to the fleet rendezvous point if we leave now. The team worked quickly, setting the shuttle systems to full power. As the engines roared to life, Quinlan felt a weight settle in her chest. The galaxy was on the brink of war, and humanity had become the trigger. She knew that they were about to face an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. These ancient beings weren't simply powerful. They were survivors. They had endured eons, and in their retreat, they had only grown more dangerous. Just as they were about to take off, a new voice, calm and cold, echoed through the shuttle's comm system. You cannot escape what is inevitable. Humanity is the reckoning, and your presence here seals your fate. We are coming for you. A chill ran down Quinlan's spine. It wasn't a warning. It was a promise. The shuttle shot up into the atmosphere, the planet's surface quickly falling away behind them. Quinlan's mind raced as she tried to piece together the strange puzzle they had uncovered. The Aurelians had fought an ancient war against humanity's distant ancestors, and now those same ancestors, somehow, were coming again, as a shadow of a past long forgotten. It was clear that something had awoken. Some force, beyond their understanding, had risen again. We're not just facing the old races, are we? Quinlan whispered to herself. We're facing something older, something that has been lying in wait for us. The shuttle's engines hummed as they broke through the planet's atmosphere and into open space. But as they moved toward the fleet rendezvous point, Quinlan saw something that made her blood run cold. In the distance, something massive was emerging from the shadow of a nearby moon. More ships, darker and more foreboding than anything humanity had ever seen. They weren't just running from the ancient powers. Humanity had become the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. And now, the galaxy's true powers were coming to make them pay. The shuttle's engines roared as Quinlan's team sped through space, leaving the dying world of the Aurelians behind. The massive fleet that was converging on their location loomed like a shadow, dark and foreboding. Quinlan's eyes were fixed on the distant vessels, their shapes beginning to solidify through the viewport. The sheer size of them sent a ripple of unease through her. These weren't ships of a forgotten civilization. They were the tip of something much darker, much older than humanity had ever prepared for. Commander, I'm picking up strange energy signatures, Lieutenant Jin said, her voice tight with anxiety. They're not following the usual patterns. She paused, her fingers frantically working the controls. They're accelerating. They're coming at us faster than anything we've ever seen. The shuttle shuddered as the first wave of ships opened fire. Beams of red energy flashed toward them. cutting through the void with brutal efficiency. Jin veered the shuttle sharply to the left, narrowly avoiding the first barrage, but the damage was done. The shields flickered in and out, the shuttle systems groaning under the strain. "They're not stopping," Quinlan muttered, her voice low. "This isn't just a battle. They want to wipe us out. They're trying to prevent us from reaching the rendezvous point," Dr. Vos added, her face pale as she scanned the incoming ships. "If we don't make it to command, the entire fleet will be at risk." Quinlan clenched her fists, her mind racing. "We won't make it at this rate," she said. "We need to buy time." Jin's voice cut through her thoughts. "I can try a desperate maneuver, but the shuttle won't survive another hit like that. We'll be sitting ducks." Quinlan nodded sharply. "Do it. We don't have a choice." As Jin engaged the shuttle's emergency thrusters, the vessel rocketed toward the oncoming enemy, dodging the barrage of incoming fire with impossible agility. The sky around them seemed to crackle with energy as the massive ships continued to close in. "Commander, we're nearing the fleet coordinates," Lieutenant Jin called out, a note of hope in her voice. "We can make it, but we're running out of time." Quinlan's gaze locked on the massive fleet ahead. It was a mix of human and alien ships, seemingly an alliance forged in desperation. Some of the ships were showing heavy signs of battle damage, a testament to how fiercely the galaxy's ancient inhabitants had resisted humanity's expansion. But it didn't matter now. Humanity had pushed too far, too fast, and now the old powers were making their move to reclaim their position. The shuttle veered toward the human fleet, but as they neared the rendezvous point, a new threat appeared on the horizon. Emerging from the massive ships that had chased them was a smaller, sleek vessel, its hull glowing with an ominous green light. It was fast, too fast. Quinlan's heart skipped a beat. "It's them," she whispered. The Aurelians, the ancient beings who had once controlled this region of the galaxy, were now circling around the incoming human fleet, their massive ships hovering like dark sentinels. They were the first to arrive, and they were bringing with them a terrible weapon. "We can't outrun them," Quinlan said, her voice tight with the realization. "And we can't hide. They're coming for us." The voice from the comms came again, now a haunting reminder of how deep the galaxy's fractures ran. "Humanity is the reckoning. You have no place among us." Quinlan swallowed hard, her grip tightening on the shuttle's controls. The battle was not just for survival. It was for humanity's place in the galaxy. The ancient powers had seen the rise of a new force, one they had feared for eons, and now they were willing to burn everything to the ground to stop it. As the fleet drew nearer, the space around Quinlan's shuttle seemed to shrink, the forces of destruction pulling them into their orbit. The reckoning had come, and humanity had become the lightning rod for the storm that was about to tear through the stars. The shuttle plunged toward the human fleet, the monstrous ships of the Aurelians closing in fast. The air inside the shuttle was thick with tension as Quinlan's team braced for impact. The eerie green light from the approaching Aurelian vessel cast long shadows over the crew, and Quinlan knew that this moment would define the future of humanity. "We're almost there," Jin said, her voice tight with determination. "We can't afford to miss the rendezvous point." "Hold on, Commander." The shuttle swerved and bucked, dodging another barrage of energy blasts. The air vibrated with the crackling sound of weapon fire, each blast a reminder that humanity was facing not just a battle for survival, but a war against the oldest forces in the galaxy. The Aurelians were here, and they weren't just stopping at resistance. They were here to destroy. The view ahead was chaos. The human fleet, scattered but still formidable, was already engaging the Aurelian ships. Fighters darted between massive capital ships, releasing salvo after salvo of weapons fire. Explosions rippled through the darkness of space as energy shields flickered and broke under the pressure of the battle. "We can't land safely in the middle of that mess," Jin shouted as the shuttle trembled again from a near miss. "We don't have a choice," Quinlan snapped, her mind racing. "Get us as close to the command ship as you can. We need to deliver the message. Humanity's survival depends on it." Jin nodded, her hands flying over the controls. On it, the shuttle barreled toward the central command vessel of the human fleet, a sleek ship with the insignia of high command emblazoned on its hull. As they neared, Quinlan's stomach twisted. She could see the gaps in the fleet's defenses, the moments of vulnerability. The Aurelians were overwhelming them with their sheer numbers and firepower. And from the looks of it, they were just getting started. "Hold on tight," Jin shouted, and with a sudden burst of speed, the shuttle lurched forward, plunging through the chaos and toward the command ship. Quinlan's mind was focused solely on the task at hand. As they neared the ship, a massive explosion rocked the fleet, sending debris spiraling in all directions. The shuttle jerked violently to the side, and Quinlan gritted her teeth. They couldn't afford to get stuck in the debris. They had to reach the ship. "We're almost there," Jin called out. The shuttle's thrusters screamed as it closed the final distance, the command ship now looming directly ahead. The massive warships of the Aurelians were closing in, their deadly weapons aimed right at the heart of humanity's last line of defense. Quinlan's heart pounded in her chest. They had no time left. The reckoning had begun. And if humanity didn't act now, it would be too late. "Ready?" Quinlan asked her team, her voice steady despite the storm raging outside. Vaz nodded grimly. "Ready." "We have one chance," Quinlan said, her gaze fixed on the human command ship ahead. "Get us in position. We're going to fight for humanity's future, no matter what happens." With a final burst of speed, Jin brought the shuttle alongside the command ship, and Quinlan wasted no time in deploying the emergency docking protocol. The shuttle slammed against the docking bay with a jarring impact, and the hatch hissed open, revealing the command room of the fleet. Quinlan was the first to step out, her boots heavy against the floor as she strode toward the command center. The officers on board looked up, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and urgency. They were ready for orders, and Quinlan wasn't about to let them falter now. "Commander Quinlan," one of the senior officers said, saluting her. "We've been tracking the Aurelians' movements. They're not just attacking. They're pushing toward our homeworld. We need a plan. Fast." Quinlan took a deep breath, her mind focusing. "We've uncovered something critical. Humanity is at the center of a war that started long before us. The Aurelians and others fear what we've become, and they'll stop at nothing to wipe us out. We need to stop them now, or we risk losing everything." Her words hit the crew like a shockwave. They understood the gravity of the situation. The galaxy's oldest beings were united in their resolve to eradicate humanity before it could tip the balance of power forever. "Prepare for the worst," Quinlan continued, her voice resolute. "We're not just fighting to survive. We're fighting to prove that humanity has a place in this galaxy. We have one chance to make our stand. Let's make it count." The command center buzzed with activity as Quinlan stood at the head of the room, staring down at the holographic map of the galaxy. The battlefield stretched across the stars. Humanity's fleet, now reinforced with additional forces, was locked in a brutal fight against the Aurelian Armada. But Quinlan knew that this was not just a battle of ships and soldiers. This was a fight for the future, a war that would determine whether humanity could carve out a place among the galaxy's ancient powers or be crushed beneath their weight. "We've confirmed their movements," one of the officers reported, a cold edge in her voice. "The Aurelians are converging on our homeworld, Earth. They're pushing their forces forward in waves, with no sign of retreat." Quinlan's eyes narrowed. They've already made their move then. Earth isn't just their target, it's their final stand. If they can take it, humanity's entire infrastructure will collapse. "Commander," Jin called out, her voice steady but strained. "We've managed to hack into their communications. They're preparing something large. It's not just another assault. It's a weapon." "A weapon?" Quinlan asked, feeling a chill creep up her spine. "What kind of weapon?" Jin hesitated, glancing at her console before replying. "It's unclear, but the energy readings we're detecting are unlike anything we've encountered before. It's not just the Aurelians. They're being assisted by other factions, some of the oldest races in the galaxy. Quinlan exhaled slowly, trying to steady her nerves. The Aurelians were a formidable foe on their own, but now they were gathering a coalition of ancient beings, all united by one common goal: to extinguish humanity's rise before it could disrupt the established order of the stars. "We don't have much time," Quinlan said, her voice now low and commanding. "Our only option is to engage them head-on. We need to break their momentum before they reach Earth." The room fell silent as the weight of her words settled over the officers. It was clear that humanity had no more room for retreat. The war had escalated beyond anything they had imagined, and now they were facing an ancient, unified enemy with power that rivaled their own. "Prepare the fleet for immediate combat," Quinlan ordered. "We're going to meet them head-on. This is humanity's last chance to prove we belong here. We're not just going to survive this. We're going to win." Outside the command center, the hum of engines and the thrum of battle could be felt as the fleet moved into formation. The human ships, bolstered by cutting-edge technology, powered up their weapons, readying for what was to come. But Quinlan knew that technology alone wouldn't be enough to win this fight. Humanity would need something more. She turned to Vos, who had been silent for most of the briefing. "Dr. Vos, any updates on the data we retrieved from the ancient station? Is there anything in there that could give us an edge?" Vos glanced up, her eyes weary. "There's one thing we haven't fully explored yet, a piece of technology buried deep in the archives. It's a relic from the previous conflict between the Aurelians and that lost version of humanity. I think it could be used to counter their weapon, but we'd need to act fast." Quinlan's gaze hardened. "We don't have the luxury of time. We're going to need it operational now." Vos nodded, already moving to the console. "I'll get to work on it immediately." The countdown to battle had begun, and Quinlan could feel the weight of the galaxy's fate pressing down on her shoulders. She wasn't just commanding a fleet. She was leading humanity's charge into the unknown, into a future where their place among the stars would either be solidified or destroyed. The last piece of the puzzle fell into place, and the battle unfolded in real time on the holographic display in front of them. The Aurelians, along with their allies, were closing in on Earth's orbit. Time was running out. Quinlan stood tall, locking eyes with her crew, her voice unwavering. "This is it. The reckoning is upon us. We will not falter. We will not fall." The battle had already begun, and the final confrontation was imminent. Humanity was no longer an underdog. The stakes had been raised to the highest point imaginable. As Quinlan stared into the heart of the approaching storm, she knew that this war would be their defining moment. If humanity was to survive, they would have to fight with everything they had, and they would have to win.